Hi everybody, welcome to Archimarathon. It's been heaps of requests about can we do something describing how you start the design process. Yes, we can. Welcome to Archimarathon. Roll intro.
Oh.
Behind us is Captain Cook's cottage in Fitzroy Gardens in Melbourne. Did you know that this is allegedly where he grew up in North Yorkshire, in this house? And in 1934, they brought this house on a ship and rebuilt it here, halfway around the world.
Why?
Exactly.
Colonialism.
Colonialism. Yeah.
How do you know all this shit?
Well, I'm a historian, amateur historian, and I also read it on a sign over there 5 minutes ago. All right, you requested it, so we're doing it. We're going to do a series of videos about different ways to start the design process, or what happens when you get stuck, a different tactic to try. Yeah?
Yeah.
But today, we're going to talk generally about how to start the design process.
There is no right way to start the process.
Spoiler alert.
Oops.
It's really, really hard. Because design is critical thinking. There isn't a rule book. It isn't like learning to drive a car. There isn't a prescribed method. It's about problem solving. And if there was a prescribed way of dealing with problems, then we wouldn't have any.
It's creative problem solving, which is even harder.
Yeah. What you're doing at uni is learning critical thinking. What you're doing when you design something is critical thinking. It's hard. So, stage one, get organised. I had a lecturer who said, resist the temptation to start designing straight away. Because if you don't understand your brief intimately, if you don't understand the site intimately, then you're going to go off on some tangent where you might think, oh, this is a really great idea. But guess what? It doesn't fit on the site, or it doesn't deal with council regulations, or it doesn't deal with orientation.
Having said that though, it is worthwhile doing that and then come back and see, oh, actually, it doesn't work. It's okay.
That's right. So, lesson 2, it's non-linear. So if you do have a spark of inspiration, you always have to stop the process. Whenever you have an idea that's outside of what you're on right now, pause, jot it down. Always have note paper beside you to jot down that idea. That might work.
Draw it, and that's the thing. If you think it, draw it.
And you've got to learn ways of doing the simplest diagrams. They're probably ugly and they're probably meaningless to anybody else. Jot it down and then get back to the task you're working on, which is a good, solid base drawing.
Draw them well as well. The better the base condition drawings, the better the design tends to be. Because I think part of the drawing of it also makes you understand the site, you understand the problems, the process. Be it a really good 3D model or just really good base drawings, translate the surveyor's drawings, to really kind of, it's a different purpose, right? They're not design drawings. You've got to turn them into good design drawings, good line weights, all that stuff.
Okay, so Kev, design is a lot like this tree.
Nah, bullshit, man. No. Nah, God, that's fucking bullshit. Nah, not doing it. Nah, make me do it. Now, dirty lens. I gotta fucking clean it now. Yeah, you did.
No, you're just like fiddling with your lens. Okay, metaphors are fine. Highfalutin ideas, great. Jot them down. Get back to the first part. Understanding your brief, understanding your site. Can't stress that enough. And so in my office, I talk to the crew about this a lot. Do the boring stuff first. Don't get too excited. Make sure you're setting up the project. But guess what happens when you're doing the boring stuff? So often, you come out with some cool ideas. Jot it down, get back to the boring stuff.
And by jotting it down, you don't mean write it down necessarily. You may be writing 1 or 2 words down, but the most important thing, again, is to draw it graphically.
I will have a A3 page with 6 boxes on it, and that's it. And then I will quickly do a diagram, jot down a couple of keywords, give it a title. Airflow, orientation, circulation. May never use that diagram again, may be wrong or something like that, but I've captured a moment of thought.
Another thing to do if you're really stuck though, is to draw what you don't want to do, what you think you don't want to do.
Boom.
Because the process of drawing means to bring out. So you're actually bringing out thoughts. So in this case, you are bringing out something you think you don't want. Yep. And you can now have it on a piece of paper or somewhere and evaluate it. Without it being drawn out, ideas, it's very hard to evaluate.
The broken ideas, the ideas that don't work, that you're convinced in your own mind don't work, sometimes they might work, but they're really useful in terms of communication. So whether you're a student talking to a lecturer or you're an architect talking to a client, often you get parts of the brief that you just kind of know won't work. You've got to draw it to show the disadvantages of that idea. And in terms of being a student, if you put up ideas that don't work and you address that, you show your flow of consciousness, your lecturer is going to love it. So instead of being like a sales pitch, please love my idea, you can say, well, this is the process I went through and I disregarded this idea and this idea. You're actually enabling your tutors to come into your thought process.
Well, that's a whole episode altogether about how to get the most out of studios, because I think a lot of students think it's about proving themselves as opposed to, no, you're opening up a conversation. You are explaining to them what you're thinking about and, you know, your thought process. It's important to communicate that.
Yep.
As opposed to sell it and just be offended if they don't like it.
Design is non-linear. So your brain's thinking about multiple things at once. We just talked about capturing that in diagrams. But you've got to actually work that multifaceted thinking. So for example, when you're sitting down producing a drawing, you know, so often people design and then they go, now it's time to draw. You think through drawing, like do my final drawings. So when you're drawing, quite often your brain will kind of switch off in a way. I think this is akin to driving a car. You know how you drive a car and then suddenly you go, where did the last 10 minutes go? You know, because you do something that's sort of automated, you disappear into your own head. So quite often when you're drawing a section or something like that, you'll be thinking about other parts of the building in quite a critical, creative way. Pause, write down some of those, jot down some of the diagrams that come out of that thinking process. Design's non-linear, capture as many ideas as possible. So this could be the base document. This could be part of your design presentation. You're always thinking about the design, capture it.
So scale is another important thing. I think to have, well, that's a whole episode altogether again about scale and how a lot of graduates even can't get scale right. Look, I don't use the word scale. Often I actually use the word resolution. So instead of saying 1 to 1,000 scale, then you just on the computer, you just press print and then, you know, out it comes. No, you need that scale in front of you because at 1 to 1,000, there's only so much information you can have. Whereas in computer space, or even in your brain, you can get right down to, you know, a bolt and a nut.
Yeah. So scale's super important. This is where computers become a problem. If you're at 1 to 1,000, you're going to think about specific things. You're going to think about urbanism. You're going to think about positive and negative space. You're going to think about the way that humans as a collective move through space. When you then zoom into 500, 200, 100, you start to think about individuals. 1 to 50, you think about individuals occupying space. So that means that people that grew up learning on a drawing board, you have these different segments of design thinking that are associated with scale. If you're in a computer, you're zooming in and out constantly and you can get stuck on the door detail.
Because you can't draw that much at 1 to 1,000. You can't draw the little finer details. You can only draw some fat lines around something and some kind of overall layout.
Yeah, so what we're saying is it makes design easier. I'm constrained to think about this on an urban sense or on a detail sense because the scale limits that thinking, which is a good thing because there's too many things to think about. That doesn't mean we think computer bad. What we're saying is you need to learn to think at those resolutions.
Having said that though, again, just to turn the rules upside down again, it is okay to start with a detail sometimes.
Yep.
You might just go, I really like this material. How am I going to explore this and how can I turn it into a project? It can happen. Like there is no right way.
So somebody like Kengo Kumar, you can see quite often starts with a material or a detail idea. And he goes, well, that's the architecture, is how I want this material to connect to another. And then the building program will evolve out of that. That's a legitimate place to start, is the detail scale. But again, this will go back to how to start or adaptive design thinking. There are many ways to try this. It's good if you can learn many of them. If you can't, so often you're told at university you start at that 1 to 1,000 scale, so often I don't have an idea at that scale. So I test out other scales to see if I've got an idea.
So basically, you've got all this mess in front of you.
Yep.
And it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have this mess in front of you, because then you can stand back and evaluate and try to connect the dots. If there is commonality, is there something, is this an idea in all that?
That is a really good point. It's a mess. Design is a mess.
The fog of war, you call it?
The fog of war. It is all a mess. What architects do, and this is sort of a pity, is they make complex things look simple. But that's sort of the end game. You want to make the design look inevitable. But what you need to know is it's a grind. It's painful. Every single time to start that design process. I wish there was a rule book. But if there was, we'd all be producing the same thing.
Yeah, and AI would take over and we are f***ed.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, duckies. Duckies. Oh. Here they are. Ooh, defensive.
They're like, feed me. Feed me. Can I eat the camera?
Can I eat the duck?
Oh, I had duck for lunch yesterday. It was yummy.
Ooh, nice.
Did you hear that? You know how I was saying it's non-linear, and to jot down things really quickly, just capture things in drawing. Quite often what you're doing is building up evidence that then you have to put in an ordered state. So one thing we've talked about in the past is, in many ways, you're kind of like a detective trying to solve a case. It's not presented to you in a linear, clear way. So you know, in the sort of the cliche of the board with the images and information and all of the bits of string linking them in the detective movies, you need to think about design that way. Is you're sneaking up on solving this case. It's not going to present itself to you. You've got to grind through it. It's a mess. And so when you're collecting all of these drawings, little diagrams that may or may not be useful evidence, they enable you to stand back and go, have I got anything? Can I see a pattern?
And then that's quite an important skill, the ability for pattern recognition. I think that's very important in architects. And I think that relates to our last episode with party diagrams and just seeing, is there a pattern? You know, is there an order to all this? Could there be an order that link it all together?
Yep.
And that also links to the post-justified episode, which is also about how can you actually make it make sense.
Yep.
That's a skill.
You do seem excited, manic.
I am.
Verging on ecstatic.
Psychotic. I should have brought you a sedative.
So you're collecting evidence. So if you're not drawing, guess what? You're not collecting evidence. You also then end up presenting one thing to a client or to tutors, and it's so easy for them to attack it. So you're a crime scene investigator. Search the crime scene for evidence, start piecing things together and see if a pattern emerges. And hopefully what happens a lot with detectives in these movies is they'll have a revelation. They'll have a creative idea. Shit, what if that thing there happened with that thing? And it gets all Cluedo. That's what we're doing in design.
It's the semen sample.
My God.
It's like a Jackson Pollock painting.
So we're making a series out of this, right?
Yeah, next episode will be site analysis, how to actually make a useful site analysis.
Because often they're not done well.
And then we'll do a series on different approaches to starting with starter design, or how to deal with difficult issues, how to change tack. So one's the grind, which is the usual one, the moment of inspiration, which is the rare one that we're all taught exists, and many other tactics. So we'll do an episode on each one of those. So next time you get stuck in the fog of war, you might go, well, shit, I'm going to try drawing a detail, or I'm going to try going right out to goddamn global level, because you're a detective and you're trying to find patterns. You know that strike of lightning moment that, you know, everybody's convinced creative people have? Like, oh, this moment of genius.
Like by power of Grayskull.
By the power of Grayskull.
Form, blazing sword. These lightning bolts, the creative geniuses have. Bullshit. It's a grind. But every now and then you do have like a really strong idea. And but this is not what you should rely on. But here's
The
a really,
stroke of genius.
Yeah, well, just a very clear idea. And so,
Like the Frank Gehry crumple paper.
yeah.
Frank Gehry, you're a genius.
Frank Gehry, you're a genius.
Behold the new Springfield Concert Hall.
So a project that I've recently designed is one of those incredibly rare moments where it was just an intuitive response to site. It's for a film director, and he stood on site doing that film director thing, you know, this aspect ratio. And so I just imagined a house immediately. I imagined it, and I never start that way. Like I'm usually dealing with site and orientation and council regs where I actually visualize a building. That shit just doesn't happen. So I got totally carried away and I just built it in 3D and then did an animation. It's kind of the process that so many people imagine and so many people want to do. But I'm here to tell you, it's just the rarest thing. And I showed it to the client with such enthusiasm, and it's interesting, human psychology and emotion. They kind of rejected it a bit, and that's because I hadn't engaged with them enough about the brief. Like they hadn't felt listened to. And I just had to say, look, I just had a rush of blood. Like I was really excited about this, so I thought it's better to let explore an idea and let it die than not explore it at all. That's why we draw lots.
It's okay to be shot down. Did you feel bad that they didn't?
No, not at all. The way that I figured this out very early on, produce as many ideas as possible, and it's a war of attrition.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest, or it may be a brilliant idea that's not accepted. You haven't been able to convince the client, or it's not in their realm of thinking. Guess what? Store it away, you can use it for later. But I would rather produce a lot of ideas without emotion and see which ones survive. The problem is, and this has only ever happened once, is when a client says, I'll take them all. And then you end up with a really messy building. It's like, no, pick 2 or 3, not all 22. Anyway, that's an episode about the rush of blood and the spark of inspiration, which can be a short episode because it's bullshit. It rarely happens. Thank you for your suggestion on this series of videos. As always, leave a comment. Let us know of your tactics of starting the design process. As always, like, comment, subscribe, Patreon.
Discord. Yeah, it's got over 120 people now.
Having chats online.
Lots of chats.
You can post your plans there and say, hey, yo, what do you think of this? You can post a really beautiful render with no other references and you'll watch this guy just go ad hoc at you. Just like, what the f is it? How are we meant to know how this is important? It's a pretty image, but I don't tolerate it. Yeah,
That's
best
not
impersonation ever.